Right. So, that being said, hello everyone. Welcome to our today's meeting. My name is Yaroslav Smovzh. I'm an assistant of the project on German-Ukrainian cooperation at the Unionation Foundation and at the EES project. EES stands for Eastern European Youth Empowerment Space, which is an ambitious young organization who I encourage all of you to follow. And this meeting is set up in cooperation with dechat, which is a Telegram channel dedicated to Germany and the German-speaking space in Europe. So if you're interested in what's happening there, you might as well want to give our friend Alexei here a follow. And joining us today is Roderich Kiesewetter, who's a member of the German Parliament and one of the most staunch Ukraine supporters in Germany, as well as me, being the entirety of Europe. Mr. Kiesewetter, good afternoon, and maybe if you want to introduce yourself, you may have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, dear Yaroslav Smovzh, and also my gratitude to Alexei Lesnov. I'm really grateful that I have the honor to have the chance to discuss with you, to exchange views. My background is I'm a parliamentarian since 2009, but before that, I served for 27 years in our armed forces. I am a full colonel, not a full colonel, full colonel in the general staff. My last appointment was at SHAPE in the NATO headquarters, especially taking care about Afghanistan. But we at that time had to do a lot with Georgia and with the Russian ambassador to NATO, Rogozin, who today is very close to Putin. So I saw already in 2007, 2008 the differences. And in 2007, I participated in the Munich Security Conference and could look on the speaker's corner. And I saw when Putin spoke, and his speech was in this format, uh, A5, and on every page, at least one third was overwritten with handwritten remark, sometimes also more. So I really had witnessed that this speech had his own handwritten ideas. So I already saw will happen with Russia in 2007. So I'm very grateful, and I don't want, without much ado, I'm ready to take your questions and feel free. I have no concerns if you also are raise very blunt questions. Uh, I'm really happy if you really speak freely. Thank you.
All right, then. Let's move on to our first block of questions, which will be dedicated to foreign policy. So, first of all, Germany, for a better part of this year, has been governed by a new government led by a coalition of Christian Democratic Union and the Social Democratic Party, and of course the new Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Now, my question is, do you think the relations between Germany and Ukraine have improved since the new government came into power?
Well, the Chancellor himself and our foreign minister said that they would like to continue the foreign policy of the preceding government. And indeed, during the election campaign and as opposition leader, Friedrich Merz always made clear that if Russia is continuing its horrible war, he would like to start training Taurus and send it. But after the election, he didn't talk about it and he didn't start such a program. I believe what has changed is that Germany is not one-sided looking to the United States as Chancellor Scholz did. He neglected completely the cooperation with Poland, France, the Baltic states, Scandinavian states, and UK, and focused merely on a good relationship with Biden. And therefore, UK and the Baltic states created the coalition of the willing, the Tallinn Initiative, because they want to do more, where Germany was using the brakes. So this has changed. Germany has joined join the coalition of the willing. However, we are supporting Ukraine with air defense measures, and some money, but we are not exceeding our production rates in ammunition, in artillery, and in tanks, so that the real number of delivered artillery, howitzers, tanks, and infantry fighting vehicles has not changed at all. So I personally am quite disappointed. However, what has changed is the personal relationship between Merz and Zelensky. I believe this is much more even-handed than it was, but we do not only look for psychological good relationship, we also look for the outcome. And the output and the outcome has not increased in comparison to the preceding government.
Right. And then what should be the precise measures that should be taken to correct that situation?
Well, there are several measures. Let's use like an onion from the outside to the inner. From the outside, there is frozen money in Europe, 230 billion euros, Russian money, which could be handed over to Ukraine. But there are two countries quite reluctant. It's Belgium and Germany, because they are in fear of the financial marketplace, Europe, and the stability of the euro. But nevertheless, due to the fact that it is frozen money, in the past, it was a clear signal to rogue states not to suppress other countries. So there will be no damage if we handed over this money. This would be the first measure. Second, we could stop the shadow fleet in the Baltic, the fleet with tanker ships who are transporting Russian gas and oil to other parts of the world. And if we stop them leaving the Baltic Sea, Russia would not earn foreign money, foreign currency. Third, we could follow an idea from Estonia to organize air defense over Western Ukraine with a coalition of the willing, so that the Ukrainian anti-air defense forces, I visited a Patriot battery close to Odessa some months ago, they could put more of their own assets to the east, to the south, and to the northeast, which would be very helpful. Fourth, we could scale up our own production. For example, Iris Tea, they produce 2 to 3 pieces a month instead of 200 or 300. So to change from manufacturing production to serial production. And fifth, to promulgate publicly, also to our population, that Ukraine is defending our peace, freedom, and self-determination, and is having huge sacrifices for that. So that Ukraine deserves EU membership and NATO membership as soon as possible, and not in a long, distant future. This means also that we have to prepare our own population that the war might exceed if Ukraine fails. And therefore we have to do more and to include Ukraine into our own defense thinking, instead of believing that if Russia might be satisfied if Ukraine might be broken into pieces. So we have to be very clear and very blunt that there are movements not only in Germany, but also in Hungary, a little bit in France, and also in Ireland and so, who say Ukraine has to hand over territory and then there will be peace. And this is really ill-advised, wrong, and insane. And so we need a more clearer stance. Nevertheless, our own government is in fear of population in Eastern Germany who have a very romantic view to Russia, but they mix Russia with the Soviet Union. They mix Gorbachev with Putin. And this is really ill-advised, but it shows the influence of cognitive warfare. Russia is conducting military warfare, civil warfare, and cognitive warfare. And the cognitive warfare is especially focused on the German society as well as of the French society, because they were seen as weak and influenceable. And the last remark is what should be done to start to send long distance, high precision ammunition in huge numbers to Ukraine, that Ukraine is able to stop the aggression on the Russian territory, to destroy storages, to destroy fabrics, enterprises, production lines, and command posts and bunkers on the Russian territory. And I would like to add that I was completely under pressure in February last year when I said, we, Germany and others, have to enable Ukraine to put the war on Russian territory. People believed that this was fake, that this was done by artificial intelligence, but I made this on purpose. And some months later, also our government at that time, Chancellor Scholz, said, yes, we have to enable Ukraine to bring the war to Russia. But you see the mindset. People do not think in long perspectives. They have no strategic forecast. And I see my task to wake up people, to make them understand. Last remark, the German mistake is that we learned from our past, never fascism again, never war again. But our neighbors and Ukraine suffered from 8 million losses murdered by Germans. 8 million. Your consequence is never defenseless again. And we Germans believe that all must think no war again. But those who exploit it, like Russia, they must learn that all countries, including Germany, have to say never defenseless again. Sorry, this was a little bit long.
Long but wise nonetheless. Well, as we've established, Europe has to take more responsibility for what's happening in Ukraine, and for providing the defenses and the necessary equipment and whatnot. However, Germany is also a leading force of Europe, and since the new government came into power, there have been changes in European perception of Germany and the Merz government. Do you think Germany has regained its leadership role? And if not, then what needs to be done to achieve that?
The leadership role is still executed by France and UK. But UK is under domestic pressure due to an anti-European party, a very populist party, Farage. And France will lose its government today. So the president will stay in office, but in 27 he has to leave. And it could be that the Russian-friendly movement of Le Pen might assume power. Therefore, Germany has an additional responsibility, especially also in better cooperation with Poland. We have neglected our relationship to Poland due to some challenges. They are requesting reconciliation and also money for that, what we have done in the Second World War. So there is a lot of unexplained barriers and unexplained burden from the past, which we have to overcome. So I see the need that most of the European countries are waiting for Germany and German leadership due to our economic power. We have a GDP of 4.3 billion euros, which is really high, but we only invest 0.1% of our GDP for the military support of Ukraine, whereas Denmark and the Baltic states invest up to 2% of their GDP for the military support of Ukraine. So in figures, we invest about 4 to 5 billion euros a year for the military support. And if we would triple that to 0.3%, like UK does, 0.3%, then this would be 15 billion euros. So much more than in the past. So we have envisaged now to double it for next year to 9 billion euros, but still far below our own capabilities. And the problem of Germany is that we always claim the leadership role, but if there is a clear question, Germany, are you ready to prepare troops to safeguard or to protect Ukraine for further attacks? Then leading officials say this question is not a, a question which is at stake. Or they say, well, we are the logistic hub for the others. So we do not accept that leadership means also leading from the front line. But nevertheless, we have to be very clear that troops on the Ukrainian ground, be it supported by Germany or others, cannot be a replacement for a NATO membership and cannot be the gratification for handing over territories. So I also would like to encourage you not to accept to hand over territory by Western pressure and not to accept the presence of troops and a replacement for perspectives in EU as NATO. And therefore, we always have to formulate goals and aims. And this aim is not clear in Europe. Some say Russia must not win, Ukraine must not lose. Others say we have no chance against Russia. I would like to stipulate it very clear. Russia has to learn to accept the right of existence of all of its neighbors, and Ukraine has the right over all of its territory in the borders of 91. And this must be the end state, be it in 5 years, be it quite easily. But if we want to achieve these goals, we have to do much more. And we cannot say, okay, you get some money and then try to achieve a victory. The victory must be a common victory. And it is not the idea to contain Russia by hoping that Ukraine might resolve the issue. We all, our rule-based Europe is at stake, Ukraine's failing or fading away. And therefore, leadership should mean leading from the front line and to accept the desire of Ukraine and to help to make this desire come true.
True that. Yeah. So as far as France's example shows, there's great deal of dissent between the government and the president, or the parliament and the government, as in France's case, can lead to an erosion of leadership in the case of such a powerful state as France. Well, in order for Germany not to suffer the same thing, the new government has decided to pursue a new policy as opposed to the previous government. It called it Außenpolitik aus einem Guss, which means foreign policy as a unit, right? What do you think has changed in the mechanism of foreign and security policy formation with the arrival of the new government? And does it really work the way it was intended to?
Well, we are working on that. And to be very honest, we have some differences in the Near Middle East policy. So the right of existence of Israel, that's clear. But we have different approaches regarding a Palestinian state, which is, I believe, unfeasible, and the role of Israel in the region. So there is still something to do. But in parallel, we are building up a National Security Council who has several goals. One is to have one picture about the situation, to create one how shall I say, one a commitment about the situation for all governmental parts, for all ministries. Second, we will start exercises to train politicians and leading people in the services and in the armed forces for better policy making in crises. And third, we will adapt our national security strategy, including high precision long distance missiles with a reach of more than 2,000 kilometers, also far beyond Moscow. So there are really changes which are very helpful. As regards Ukraine, we have to be very clear that there are different approaches for the future of Ukraine inside the European Union. Some people say that it should not be prior than the Balkan states. But the Balkan states are played with by Serbia, so we cannot make us dependent from Serbia in the question of Ukraine. And also Moldova, we cannot make us dependent from Serbia. So we have to have different approaches. And there, foreign policy as a unit is still under consideration. We have to choose a different approach with Ukraine. Otherwise, Serbia will influence us as Hungary does, and also the Slovak Republic. So we have to be very careful. But I'm very optimistic that we have this change because really Merz has achieved that France, Italy, Poland, the United Kingdom, the Baltic states, the Nordics now see that they had to take over more responsibility also due to the withdrawal of the United States. Nevertheless, there is one thing we have not yet discussed to the end. I personally, my conviction is that America has changed to the team of multipolarity, that they will not support Europe in cases of pressure. So that we Europeans, including Ukraine, have to take care for our own security, including in the long run, nuclear umbrella. We cannot rely on the Americans. And what we are just seeing, you are experiencing it, you are suffering from it, is the wait for the Americans. And Trump has lost months by waiting for ultimatum, by waiting for effective sanctions, but by playing games with us and you. And therefore, we Europeans need another leadership. And I would give this a name. We need a Churchill moment and not a continuation of Chamberlain.
Sure. And that's how we came to our next chapter, which is defense policy, right? It seems now that Germany, along with other European states, after the change of power in the United States of America, after the coming of the new old Trump administration, Europe has come to realize that it needs to build up its own security to a far better extent than it used to be before. And as for Germany, it seems as if the new model of military service lies ahead. It's still much of a debate. However, which shortcomings of this new system do you think the Christian Democratic Union should improve, or otherwise push through to the coalition partners from the Social Democratic Party?
Yes. The challenge is the coalition partner. And the other challenge is that we copied the Swedish model, which Sweden has already given up some years ago, because voluntary service doesn't function in this context. So we need a mandatory service. But in comparison to your country, we need regulations that people do not leave the country in case of extremism. So what we need is a mandatory service in the armed forces and disaster relief, catastrophe management, and some other areas. So for us, the lesson identified but not yet learned is that about 600,000 Ukrainians have left the country to avoid military service. And I spoke to my colleagues in the Rada, and they said, well, we have missed the chance to create a law for disaster relief, for replacing military service by another mandatory service, so that people who are afraid to go to the front line are not afraid to take care for destroyed houses or to help firework and fire the pompiers and so on. So to be present on the countryside and helping the neighbor. And therefore, we have in our coalition partner no partner who is for mandatory service. So in one crew, one birth year, we had 800,000 young people. 400,000 male, 400,000 female. We need for the armed forces a very small number, 40, 50,000 a year. So the idea is that the 400,000 men get a letter beginning from next year, which they have to answer, and they have to declare, I am willing to serve in the army or I'm not willing. Those who are willing to serve in the army, they get an invitation by 27 onward. And then there will be more than some 20,000, 40, 50,000. We are eager to know the real figures, but we have a very complacent society. People look for work-life balance, and they are not used to challenges. So I do not believe that this will be successful in the end. And our own calculation is that Russia will be able to attack a NATO country by 29. That's the official explanation. My personal explanation is that Russia will escalate within the next 2 years. Why? Because in 28 onwards, we will be ready to cope with these challenges, to fill our ammunition stocks, to prepare the armed forces, to cooperate with neighbors, and so on. So Putin is acting like Hitler. You can see copy-paste. And Hitler started the war in 39, seeing the weak neighbors, France and UK, urged Czech Republic to hand over the Sudetenland to Germany. They urged them. They urged Poland not to defend itself. So Hitler saw that it is very helpful to start the war in Poland and then France. So I see the blueprint. We are urging you, not we in Germany, but the Prime Minister of Saxony, for example, to hand over territory. And the same does Hungary. And if you were to hand over territory, Putin would see, I can't accede against Moldova, I can't accede against Estonia, or even against Poland. So therefore, we have to not to copy the Swedish model, which failed in Sweden, but to start with a mandatory service. And then to be prepared that Russia will escalate within the next 2 years to avoid this escalation by deterrence.
Yeah, well, I think you did mention the problem I'm going to talk about now, but that is young people aged 18 to 29, along with older people, are among the main groups who overwhelmingly reject defending their homeland with weapons in their hands in Germany. What do you think led to this situation in general?
Yeah. Well, this all is a result of the post-war time after 45, where a new German pacifism was created, and our belief, nie wieder Krieg, nie wieder Faschismus, no war, never again, no fascism, never again, was the idea that if we abstain from armament, abstain from the willingness to fight, then the others will treat us peacefully. But this now has been overcome. So it is a fear of young people. It's not a conviction, it's a fear to get engaged and involved. And therefore, we have to work in education, in schools, in the society, to convince that our welfare is only based on trade and trust and on security. And if we give up security, then there will be no trade and welfare, and we will lose everything. They will end in the other field. So this must be better explained. But in parallel, our society is under pressure via Telegram, via the AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, and the Alliance Sarah Wagenknecht, the communist former member of the communist platform in the party Die Linke. And these two parties together have 30%. And they argue with pacifist ideas, and they argue with something which is very interesting for you. They say, if Germany is leaving NATO, if Germany is leaving European Union and Euro, then we could cooperate with Russia, do not have to invest much in security, And then German technology, German engineers' art, and Russian resources could make Germany independent from France, from Poland, from UK, from EU, from bureaucracy. So this is the old nightmare for our neighbors, also for Ukraine, for Poland, for all these states, because this was the idea from 1870, after the foundation of the German Empire, 1870, and 1940 with the Ribbentrop-Molotov Agreement, which was then destroyed by Hitler, Stalin, and so on. So these 70 years are seen by these people very romantically, and they say, if we show Russia that we are not willing to create a deterrence force, they might be convinced to not attack us. So this is a ill-advised, pacifist, Russian-friendly thinking, which we have to debunk in public debates. And thus, it is the general feeling in our society that some functionaries, that some volunteers should do the dirty jobs, but the others could enjoy a 35 hours week or 2 leaves a year or something like that. So it is a lack of responsibility and a lack of historic knowledge, which are the, I believe, root causes of this. But please contradict me if you see it different.
Well, I don't think we're gonna do that because I think it's quite precise what you just said. Right, I did see a question pop up there in the chat. Uh, for the person who asked the question, don't you worry. Just wait until the end of this meeting, and we will have the chance to discuss it too. And now I'll wrap up the defense policy section with the following question. What is Germany lacking in terms of defense capability? What conclusions have been drawn from the experience of the Russian-Ukrainian war in terms of adapting to the Bundeswehr, to modern warfare and resilience tactics?
Thank you for all these excellent, really brilliant questions, and really grateful for that. Well, first of all, the organization. The German armed forces, with now 180,000 soldiers, they should have 203,000, but we are lacking 23,000. These 180,000 has the same number of generals which we had when we had nearly 500,000 soldiers, 3 corps, 12 divisions, 36 brigade, more than 80 artillery battalion. I was commanding an artillery battalion some 30 years ago. This means we have still 220 generals. Why? Because we want to be attractive for young officers to become a general, and so we created a huge number of headquarters, many chieftains left in India. That means we only have 1.5 division instead of 3. We only have 9 brigades instead of more than 18, which are in the build-up. So most of the people, more than 50% of the armed forces are in headquarters or schools and not on the battalion, brigade, division, and corps level. This is a big mismatch also regarding the mindset. Second, 2011 in the war in Libya, we handed over our ammunition stocks to the Allies, and we didn't fill up them until 1 or 2 years ago. But this is really expensive, and we are still under filling it up, so it's not yet fulfilled. Third, if you reform army and reduce, you can do this within 2 years. We did this from 1990 to 2014. So in these 24 years, Germany was focused on international crisis management and not on defending our country or defending the alliance. And only starting 2014, we saw, okay, there might be a new nightmare, Russia increasing. But the real change came in 22 and not in 2014. This is really has been a big mistake. So you can deteriorate an army within 2 years, but to build it up, it takes 2 decades. Why? We have given up several hundred barracks. We have dismantled our tank force. We have had 4,000 tanks. Now we have not even 300, Leopard 2. We have had more than 80 artillery battalions. We now have four. So to build this up, you not only need personnel, you also need the armaments industry. But this armaments industry for years has asked for production capacities, and the politics had not given them the fast. So the armaments industries have joined into dual-use goods, into civilian goods. So it is very difficult now to find engineers, technicians for the build-up. So Russia was completely successful since 2011 when we gave up our nuclear power plants, and instead of investing in renewable energies, we invested in Russian gas, Nord Stream 1 and continuing with Nord Stream 2. So the mindset was completely different. And then on the political side, we did not believe that Russia is aggressive. And still today, we have some politicians who believe that we had no chance against Russia and that the expansion of NATO might be responsible for that. But even Putin said that it wasn't extension of NATO, it was the development of welfare and other for the Russian society attractive developments. So if we want to change it, we have to re-establish barracks. We have to change from manufactural production to serial production. This is possible with the necessary political will. And we have to go to mandatory service and to expand the strategic communication to our population. I hope that Friedrich Merz will do this prior to 20.
Okay, and now let's switch to this more pan-European dimension of security policy. There is a framework that was established by the Maastricht Treaty back in 1992, which set up one of the pillars of the European Union, which bears the name of Common Foreign and Security Policy, or shortly CFSP. But now there are broad discussions around this matter, which leads up to maybe the prospect of creating or transforming the CFSP towards an independently governed system, a pan-European system, a system handled by the European government, right? And that also leads us to the discussion of a single European army. Do you think it is time to transform CFSP towards that goal? Or are there other obstacles in the way that maybe tell us to just wait for a couple more years until then?
This is a really difficult question. I'm not a friend of obstacles. I am a friend of how to overcome those. But look, France never would hand over its armed forces to the European Union. France is a nuclear power, is part of the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. And the lesson identified and learned for France is never defenseless again and never be dependent from another country. So they have left NATO from 1966 to the 90s in the nuclear realm, and they came back in 2006 or 7. So I believe after Georgia. So if there is what is possible is a coalition of the willing. Look for the European battle groups, look for the permanent structured cooperation. This would be feasible and possible. However, what we need is also a legal force and not a temporary combination of the coalition of the willing, where the weaker countries are too much dependent of the willingness of the stronger one. So the alternative is not the coalition of the willing, but permanent structured cooperation inside the European Union without Hungary, without Slovak Republic. So for Germany, it's also very interesting. We have the traditions due to a constitutional law, or due to a constitutional court decision in 1994, that we say our armed forces always need the backing of the parliament for every operation abroad. And this means that also if we hand over this to the European Parliament, we insist on that the European Parliament must have the say for the deployment of European forces. I am completely in favor of that. But then our constitutional court is saying that the European Parliament is elected by free election, secret election, and but not by equal election. They say a seat for a parliamentarian of Malta or Luxembourg needs only 50,000, 80,000 inhabitants, but a seat from Germany needs 700,000 inhabitants. So a German voice for an army deployment must have 10 times more weight than a Luxembourg or Maltesian voice. And this is impossible. And so our parliament says, our constitutional court says, we cannot support by law an European army. And this we have to overcome. Our constitutional court must also have a shift in time and a Zeitenwende. This is really important because otherwise Europe will be played with. Europe will be a punching ball of others. So this is really, I believe, there will be a catalyst, and this is Trump. We have to enforce this. And furthermore, the knowledge Ukraine has gained, not only the population, but also your knowledge in the art of war. Should this go to Russia, to rogue states, to failed states, to non-state actors? No. We should learn from you, from your practice, but not in a distance, but inclusive. You as part of that. And therefore, we need to look whether it is possible, whether PESCO, Permanent Structured Cooperation, which allows the contribution of third parties, could be open for Ukraine. This would be a strong way in the future. And it is not yet, it is in my brains, it is in the brains of a few number of people, but there are ways. And for any ideas from your side, I really would be grateful. You always can contact me or could send me an email, first name dot family name at Bundestag.de. Bundestag is our radar.de. Yeah? So first name dot last name at Bundestag.de. Very easily, you could write in English, you could also write in your language, and then I look for translation. Any idea is welcome in this context.
All right. Well, it's quite clear that a single European army is so far unattainable with, taking into account France's voice and reluctance to do that, and also some other obstacles, such as the German one. But then there is a possibility of a concerted European action with what regards the army, which would be independent from NATO, right? So that's what they call a strategic autonomy, which is an idea first born in France, but also recently supported by the German Chancellor Merz. However, inside the European Union, there are some rogue states which are reluctant to push through to attain the necessary capabilities needed to deter Russia, as well as China, probably on the international stage militarily, and those are Hungary and Slovakia. Or should I say, those are not the states but the governments, so as not to impede the efforts of the honest Slovakian and Hungarian peoples. How do you think the European Union, or Europe in general as a set of nations, should deal with them? And is Article 7 of the Treaty on the European Union a panacea in this situation?
Yeah. We have had, thank you for the question, we have had several measures with Article 7 against Hungary, which was quite successful. The first measure in this context was in 2000 against Austria, but they had a very right-wing government, by the way. So Austria was sanctioned by far less incidents than today with Hungary. I am a strong partisan of the European NATO, and there is a model. This is Berlin Plus. Berlin Plus means that European Union is building upon NATO capabilities led by dechat. Dechat is the deputy of the secretary, the supreme allied commander Europe, which is always an American general, but the EEYES is a British or German general. In the last 20 years, it was the British, it's still a British general. So if we are able to overcome the deadlock between the European Union and NATO, it's depending on Turkey, Cyprus, Northern Cyprus, and Greece. So we have to include Turkey. European Union has made huge mistakes in handling Turkey in the past, big mistakes. It was unimaginable wrong. So if we are able to use the military command and control structure of NATO in Europe, this would be 50% of a success. Because we cannot afford a duplication of effort and duplication of force, duplication of different management systems, command and control systems. And I believe that Friedrich Merz is still reconsidering his position in this context, because there is no better alternative than that what has been established in NATO for decades. If the European Union is doing that, there is no EU government. We have the Council, we have the Commission, and we have a parliament with not the full rights of control. So this is not very helpful, except we create this PESCO system, permanent structured cooperation, but then we would have a committee from the different governments, and this is also very difficult. So best would be a NATO council, if America is withdrawing, then building upon the capabilities we have inside Europe. But we need different models of thinking, different models, and the most feasible must be then applied.
All right, thank you. Now, on to the next block, which I witfully named The Hands of the Kremlin, right? As far as we know, in Germany, there's a network of pro-Russian politicians which have been active since, I think, the time of Gerhard Schröder as the Chancellor of Germany, and maybe even before that. How strong do you think Russia's influence on German domestic politics is now? And that also entails the information space and the public sentiment, the influencership that Russia has in Germany. How strong is that, do you think?
We have different layers. One is, as mentioned, the Russian hybrid warfare, the cognitive warfare, in giving the appearance that Russia is invincible and that we have to follow the right of might. The second is personal relationship. You mentioned Schröder and Putin, but it's also in the economy. The East Committee of the German economy had very close links to Russia, and our former Chancellor Scholz has told them in the East Committee, don't cut off your lines of communication to Russia. You might use them again in the future. Third, we have some foundations who are biased by Russia. For example, the Adenauer Foundation, a certain part of it, they have now exchange of personnel, so this might be probably contained in the next years, but this was a source also very negative for me because I debunked this. I debunked this for Friedrich Merz last year and to his inner circle, and I remarked that the influence is so high that I was severely damaged because I debunked this. Then we have the energy sector. This energy sector is, especially fossil fuel, is very closely linked with Russia, Intersal, others, Gazprom, and so on. And there are still persons acting as spokesperson, acting as speaker, acting as Secretary of State, that means Undersecretary, Staatssekretär, Parliamentarian, and so on, who in the past achieved Nord Stream 2 or cooperated with Nord Stream 1. And now, due to the fact that SPD and CDU are cooperating in the coalition, it's that coalition which vetoed Georgia and Ukraine's membership action plan in 2008 and which vetoed in 2014 a double approach, Minsk, diplomacy, and arming and equipping Ukrainian army. And it's that coalition which cooperated in making Germany weaker by starting Nord Stream 2. So there are still people still in responsible posts who could imagine to improve cooperation with Russia after the war, even in my party. And this is the mismatch and the challenge our chancellor has, because the pressure is high and the links are high and the seduction is high. Because now we have also from the American side the idea to cooperate in the energy sector with the United States and Russia. And if United States actors purchase the remains of Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 and then receive Russian gas and sell it to Germany, people would say, wow, this is peace in our time. And this is destruction of peace, stability, self-determination, freedom in our time. But there are, to sum it up, personal connection and Russian hybrid action, energy sector, and personnel which is believing that this is the right alternative. But this goes back to the 19th century, which I mentioned before, these long-lasting lines combined with Halford Mackinder, Heartland theory, Carl Schmitt, so against the Brits, against France, against the United States, Germany and Russia as the imperial powers in Europe, Russia as a real empire, and Germany as a dwarf, believing to become a certain independence from other neighbors if we cooperate with Russia. So this is ill-advised, but I just would like to underline how seductive this is for some personnel. It's not the majority, but it's very influential. And my domestic mission is to debunk this and to help to avoid or to contain this Moscow connection. We call it Moscow connection.
Okay, that's right. Okay, so let's maybe close this first part of our today's communication with the last section, which concerns the issues after this current war. And my first question in that regard would be, there's a lot of talk in the German domestic information space about Germany's role in post-war settlement and security guarantees as to be provided to Ukraine. But do you think it is at all appropriate to talk about this now when the prospect of peace is as far as ever?
Yeah. I believe it's a wrong debate because there is no willingness on the Russian side. And the more open we debate this, Russia can read us as a book. They see our frictions, they see our constraints, they see our limits, they see our red lines already woven to a red carpet for peace. So to really convince our population and to really contain Russia and to really win your hearts and minds, we should decrease the burden money, we should stop the shadow fleet, we should take over or help to organize air defense over Ukraine against at least unmanned vehicles, aerial vehicles. And we should increase our armaments production to be in a position of strength if ever negotiations start. And not to give the feeling that we are ready to negotiate and it's only up to Ukraine to hand over territory and then it could work. This is really wrong and ill-advised. And remember, on the 16th of March last year when Navalny died and the Munich Security Conference was, and Zelensky was present in May, Germany signed the security guarantees for Ukraine. And in the introductory remarks, there was, we support a Ukraine and its borders of 1991. And this is for me the guideline.
All right. So, and do you think the entirety of Germany's political spectrum, well, notwithstanding the already pro-Russian forces, but do you think the normal parties, so to speak, understand Russia's true intentions behind this mockery of a peace process happening now?
Yes, I believe there is a silent majority in Germany which can really bear the truth and which is very knowledgeable. But we listen always to the loudspeakers of the wrong side. We are in a kind of self-deterrence. And I believe that our society knows, because there are more than 1 million refugees from Ukraine, and we have so many volunteers uh, helping them, learning from them, uh, being present, and they are very educated in their thinking. And I believe we are sometimes less courageous than we could. And therefore, I see that the majority, as I say 60%, would really, 70% would really support a stronger engagement.
All right, then. Okay, so this is where we can wrap up the public part of the discussion.